Welcome to RECO12. I'm Justin B. I'm your host and a grateful child of an all-powerful, all-loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery. RECO12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places to learn and support one another. Our speakers represent various fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery, no matter our addiction or affliction. Before getting into the business of today's meeting, I want to right now take a minute and just thank Purdy for filling in for me as last week as the host of RECO12. He did an amazing job of hosting the great meeting with Jeffrey B., and his willingness and service allowed me to have some precious time with my children and new grandchild. I tell you, this recovery life and community of fellows that we can all tie into is powerful. Thank you again, Purdy. Now for today's speaker, today's speaker for the 235th meeting is Young L, who spoke to us previously on meetings number 170 and 203. And Young's topic today is Our idea didn't work, but the God idea did, from page 52 of the Big Book. And we'll get to his talk in the Q&A afterwards in just a minute, but first for a little bit of business. RECO12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts, and our family of podcasts and social media communities continue to grow. To learn more, listen more, connect more, or just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out the other podcasts that we have. You can find those at RECO12.com. You can find those. I'll put some links in the chat here to connect with those things. Go to RECO12.com, join in our WhatsApp group. I'll give information there also in the chat and in the show notes. And just join in this community. It's really a cool thing to see happen from all over the world. It's not just in my little neighborhood of Spokane, Washington. It's not just in the United States. Our guest speaker today is coming to us from Scarborough, England, and we've got people from all over the place in here and in this community. RECO12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thank you this last week to Adele, Cheryl, and Emma Jean for being spearheads and supporting the RECO12 cause. If you would also like to support RECO12 and become a spearhead, visit www.reco12.com/support or click on the links that'll be in the chat and the show notes for one-time or monthly donation options. Your support makes a difference in keeping us sharing our message of recovery. We look forward each meeting to receiving the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce Young, give a little bit of background on him. Young found the 12-step rooms in 2010 after losing everything due to his daily heroin, crack, and alcohol addiction. He didn't take any of the 12 steps and spent the next 8 years in and out of detox units and treatment centers. He was separated from all mind-altering substances on Christmas Eve of 2018, and since that moment has thrown himself into a spiritual life and helping others. Today, he will speak to us on how our ideas don't work, but the God idea seems to work. Take it away, Young. The floor is yours.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Justin. Hi, everyone. My name's Young. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic and recovered drug addict. It's good to be here. I was just thinking of a story when I had my eyes shut then. I was thinking very recently, a couple of months ago, I was in a restaurant and behind me there was a little girl about 5 years old, and she was jumping up and down, and she had on these colourful Wellington boots, and every time she jumped up and down they started flashing on and off. And I looked at her, and in this moment this little girl was having the best moment of her life. She didn't care what she looked like, what anyone thought about her. She wasn't in fear, she wasn't in anxiety, she was in the flow of the Spirit, because her ideas were still that very innocent, hadn't been infected by this material world we're in yet. And so she was just, and I looked at her and I thought, I want what she's got. She is just plugged into the sunlight of the Spirit without even knowing it. And when I think about this, my ideas didn't work. The God idea did. And I think about being a child and how from the moment I have consciousness, from the moment my alcoholic mother sits me in front of a television, I'm bombarded with these images that give me these ideas. If I get shiny things, I'll be happy. But if I don't get shiny things, I won't be happy. I need that to fulfill me. And then I go to school and it's put the idea into my head. You need to work hard because you need to get a good job. If you don't, you're a loser. And this is the key to happiness. This is the key to the kingdom. Here's the milk and honey. So my whole old ideas are shaped through the world that I've been born into, the material world, a million miles away from the world of the spirit. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol and behavior and relationships and all these other unhealthy habits that I had, when I came into the rooms and when I was going through step one, I could see very clearly that my ideas had led me into hell. My ideas had led me into detox and hospital and psychiatric unit and burning my life to the ground and not seeing my children for years. That one of my guides, he said that to me. He said, "How's your ideas working for you so far?" And the evidence couldn't be denied. Suddenly I can see clearly. Suddenly it may be perhaps I was brought to that place of defeat and my ears opened. And before that, I'm in that delusion that my ideas, maybe it'll be different this time. I was like the lotto player who has been playing for 30 years, never won anything, but this Saturday it's going to be different. That little bit of hope that this idea will work. Now, I'm kind of laughing inside a little bit with this one. On my last relapse, when I'm using heroin and crack cocaine and alcohol every single day, and my life looks very, very bleak. I'm a criminal, a thief, a cheat. My best idea to get sober was to join the army. I thought I'll join the army. That was my best idea at that moment. And then I looked, and actually it was a thing called the Foreign Legion. It's an army in France where all the sort of roughnecks go to and they let anyone in. But then I found I was too old. But that was my best idea at that moment. I'm just going to read the bit from the big book, from this beautiful spiritual text. So rich. And I've got to say, I'm clean and sober today because of a loving God. A loving God that was always there for me. I just couldn't see it. I was so blinded by myself. I was so blinded by the drugs. I was just alive but dead. I can see that today only in hindsight by looking back. There was always evidence of God. The fact I'm alive, the fact I was born into this world. But this is the thing, and I read something today, I wish I could quote it, but it said something like, why is it my head always wants to put doubts in me about God? Why is it that the agnosticism wants to creep back in? Why is it my head wants to always try and tell me that something is wrong when nothing is wrong? Bring in doubts, bring in fear. Why is it that my ego wants to always cause a storm? It wants to ruin the Garden of Eden that I found inside my heart. Why is that? Because my ego is the enemy. I know that today. Because it's logical. It wants logic, reason. It wants to understand. But I know today the spiritual world, the world I live in, most of the time until my self-will drags me back into the material. It doesn't make sense. It has no logic. It's beyond my understanding. Even the word God, that doesn't really mean anything to me because it's just a word I try and use to describe the undescribable. Now, going back to this on page 52, when we saw others solve their problems, let me pause there. I used to be a hopeless drug addict and alcoholic. Today I'm recovered. Today I don't struggle with life. I used to always struggle with life when I was sober. I used to think recovery meant just struggling, just getting through each day. No, I tell you, no, that's not having recovery. Or maybe that's me just doing half measures, middle of the road solution. When I saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. My ideas didn't work, but the God idea did. So when I came into the rooms this time around, because I'd been in the rooms for many years without working the actual program of the 12 steps, how insane is that? How insane is that? It's like me going to the doctor, but not picking up the medicine, not picking up the medicine that's going to transform my soul. And I said this to someone today. I said, if a doctor came up to me today and said, you've got cancer, young, you're suffering from a life-threatening illness, which is what alcoholism and drug addiction is. But I've got this magic pill. And if you take this magic pill each day, not only will your illness stay in remission, not only that, but we've got a bonus prize. You'll become more loving, more patient, more tolerant, more kind, more gentle, more useful, more generous. Would I take that every day? Of course I would. Well, this is what we have in this 12-step program. I get connected to this God, and it becomes a loving God, a caring God. It gives for me everything I've been looking for. It makes me feel whole, and I do become whole. It does for me what I cannot do for myself. It's loving, it's caring, it's patient, it's kind, it has a sense of humor. It helps me to see that I'm perfectly imperfect, It helps me to learn from my mistakes and not beat myself up with a baseball bat for my flaws, for my brokenness. It helps me to see what I couldn't see before, when I was blind, when I had dirt on my glasses. But when I got connected to this power, it's almost like the dirt went off my glasses. Suddenly I see in a different way. But going back to the reading. So when I came into the rooms, I hated the word God. I'd never prayed in my life. Well, that's a lie. I prayed, when you were a little kid, about 5 years old. Actually, the moments I had prayed were the moments that I feared for my life. There's 2 moments I can share with you, one in New York and one in Barcelona. And both those times I had a knife to my throat because of the things that I used to get myself into. And I used to always go, oh, why does this always happen to me? Not seeing that I'm the problem. Not surprise, since I've had God in my life, since I've lived in this 12-step program, nothing like that has ever happened to me. But both those times, when I had a knife to my throat, one time I had about 9 guys around me and I was naked from waist down. And I thought I was going to die. And I remember saying, God, please help me. God, please help me. But why have I just said that? I don't even believe in God. I call for this power when I can see I'm so powerless and when I've got nowhere else to go. So it wasn't true that I'd never prayed. I'd screamed out for God when there was nowhere else to go. But when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, cocaine, the other fellowships that I go to, I hated the word God and I didn't think I could get to this power. But when it says here, when we saw others solve their problems, they're not just their alcohol, their drug, their women, their gambling, their sex, their problems, plural. I saw something was different in these guys and these women. And they all shouted about being connected to God, the spirit, peace, love, light. They all talk the same language. They all talk the same message. They didn't tell me what to do. They showed me by their example. Because you can't put on a lie for very long. You could sound clever in the 12-step rooms and quote the literature and sound like you're Mr. Spiritual floating on a cloud. But then maybe outside you're being unkind to someone. Maybe you're being very impatient. Maybe you're not a very good father. Maybe. But when I saw that these guys, there was something different. Their whole deportment shouted they were a person with a real answer. The way they held themselves, the way they spoke, the way they showed me love when I wasn't very lovable, the way they held out their hand and said to me, young, I can see you're in hell. Take my hand. I can guide you out of it. And I can show you how you never have to go back in it. When I saw these people and I saw their behaviors and how, even when I'm saying these words, I think about the power, just the power of being kind to one person. I know today that 1 and 1 is 1. One and one is one. I am one with you and I am one with God. I'm not a separate entity. That was my delusion, that I was separate from you. And I know today that I need to be connected to you, so I'm connected to God. And I need to be connected to God, so I'm connected to you, so I don't feel that disconnected, broken soul that needs to use and drink to feel whole, to feel okay. And you guys showed me this. You showed me the way out. I saw in you. You'd solved your problems. And it looks so attractive to me, the broken soul who was dying inside, whose life was flickering out inside him. And you welcomed me back time and time again with your kindness and your patience and your love. And today I know that came from God. Because these are guys that used to be criminals and thieves, some of them, cheats. And now they were the very same people. I know today because we live in the age of miracles. We are transformed. We are raised from the dead. Well, I can talk about me and I can talk about the people I know, being raised from the dead, taken to a level of life better than the best I'd ever known. And for any newcomers or anyone who's struggling today, I know this life lived in its entirety, where I'm spending a lot of time in prayer and meditation and dedicating my life to helping others, it gets better and better and better. But wherever you are today, that's okay. We can always readjust. We can always start again. I can always do better. I know that I'm perfectly imperfect, and that's okay today. That's just I'm exactly how I'm meant to be. But for years and years, I wanted to kill myself because I couldn't see the truth, because my idea didn't work. My idea about life, my idea about, what I needed to feel okay, or my idea that I needed something to feel okay. Certainly my ideas about how I stopped drinking and using, they certainly didn't work. But I can see my whole outlook upon life was flawed. My whole attitude upon life was flawed. My ideas, because the main problem of the alcoholic, the drug addict, centers in my mind. And that's where all my ideas come from. I needed to be able to get into this spiritual practice where I can align my thinking with God's thinking. I can get divorced from selfishness and self-centeredness. Because my ideas is always about me. My ideas is what I want, what I need, what I haven't got. I need to be right. And they don't work for me. They don't work for me because they put me in a place of restlessness, irritability, discontent, and separation from my fellow brothers and my sisters. I have trouble with personal relationships, cannot control my emotional nature. That's my life with run on myself with my ideas. So when I saw these guys, they'd solved their problems by a simple reliance on this spirit, on this God, on this higher power. How could I not want that? Because I'm dying inside. I can see you guys have got a solution and I haven't. What do I need to do? And my experience has been, this keeps getting deeper. A good teacher of mine, he often says, this big book is like a beautiful ocean 1,000 miles deep. And I get deeper into it, and my God becomes bigger. My God becomes more caring. My eyes open up wider and wider and wider. And this spiritual journey is like a circle. There is no end to it. There is no end. There is no end game. It just keeps on going. It keeps on going. I keep on growing. And this is what happened each year. Just the transformation continues in my soul. And I came in a desperate junkie, a desperate alcoholic. But I saw that you guys were relying on this thing you call God. So I'm going to have some of that. I'm going to have some of that, but I didn't know how to get there. So you guys told me, we can show you, Young. We're not going to tell you, we can show you how you can get connected to this power that actually is deep down within you. It always has been. It's the very thing that's making your heart beat, because you're nothing to do with that. It's the very thing that's making these words come out of my mouth. I'm not choosing for these words to come out. They're not thinking about it. They're just coming out. It's the very thing that keeps me alive when I'm asleep. This power inside me. And once I tap into this power inside me, once I let the floodgates in, I see the power in you. And I feel it in the wind, and I hear it in the birds, and I see it in the sun, and I feel it. I experience it. Because I can't explain, but I can experience. And it's got something else in the book that says on page 28, we in our turn sought the same escape, the escape from the bondage of self. What was my problem? I had a spiritual problem. I had a hole in my soul, which made me insane when it came to alcohol or drugs. So I needed to be restored to sanity by this loving God. The word sanity comes from the Latin word sanitas, meaning whole. I needed to be made whole. I needed to be transformed back to how that young 5-year-old girl was. Because this is the thing about this beautiful 12-step spiritual daily program. It's such a paradox, isn't it? We say things like, you have to surrender to win. I know that's not from the big book, but we hear it in the rooms. And we say things like, and this comes from the book, the more hopeless a man or woman feels, the better. That doesn't make any sense. And the other paradox, the one I was just going to say, is on one hand, through being connected to a loving God, I get transported, even if that's the right words, I get given a child's eyes again, a child's eyes of wonder. So I'm looking at things and it's almost like I'm experiencing it for the first time with that childish, excitement without any judgment. But then on the other hand, I get this thing called emotional sobriety, emotional maturity, because I came into the rooms a 40-something-year-old man, 43-year-old man, but with like a child's mind, but not in a good way, not in that childlike wonder, but petulant, demanding, moody. If I don't get what I want, I'm going to let you know. Angry, impatient, in just acting like a child. So this whole transformation of the soul has occurred in me and continues and continues and continues. We in our turn sought the same escape from the bondage of self, escape from that demanding child, escape from that pain. God, relieve me of the bondage of self. Bondage meaning slave. I'm a slave to my thinking. I believe this rubbish. Relieve me of that, God. Because when I'm like that for too long, I'm like a ticking time bomb. Because my ideas, I'm going to rely on my ideas once again. I'm going to believe the rubbish in my head once again. What seemed at first like a flimsy reed, the God thing. I say thing, that seems terrible to say that today. When you guys used to say God, I used to say, what else have you got for me? I need some serious help here. We're going to take you through this book, young. What? I need some help. I didn't know what I didn't know. It seemed a flimsy reed, but going back to the other bit, when I see how you're experiencing life, when I see that you tell me you used to be as hopeless as I used to be, but something in front of me is very different. It becomes an experience. And I want that experience for myself. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. Loving. I feel like I've been wrapped up in cotton wool and given a hug and telling me it's just everything's absolutely perfect. Because I used to live, my ideas were always in the past, where I'd live in that very famous city, self-pity city, or live in the shame and remorse, or start projecting into the future of what I need, what I haven't got. But now, in this moment, everything is perfect. Everything is perfect in this moment if I'm really mindful. Why is it perfect? Because I've got another breath where I can breathe in the spirit and I'm alive and I'm not dying inside. That's why it's perfect. But I'm only there when I'm relying on God and not self. when I get into these spiritual practices of prayer and meditation, and then they become a part of me, not something I have to do, but something I just do, like eating or drinking. And then I can live in the moment. Then I can appreciate the now. A new life has been given us, a new life, a new outlook. What seemed a flimsy, it did. Why did it seem a flimsy reed? Because I'd never experienced it before. I'd never experienced it before. So my head, going back to what I've already said, my head's the doubting Thomas. It's trying to tell me that you guys are lying. It's trying to put seeds of doubt into me. It never seems to want the best for me, this mind, to state the obvious. My mind was the very thing that used to lie to me and tell me that I can smoke crack like a gentleman today. So that, in that simple example, it doesn't want the best for me. It's not telling me, you're not going to see your children if you do this. But let's think about another example. I saw a guy in the gym last night and I said, I haven't seen you for a long time. He said, no, I haven't been for 2 years. And he said, it's funny, Young, isn't it? Because I walk past this gym every day. I know if I go in there, I'll feel better, but my head convinces me not to. It just, my ideas do not work, but the God idea does. So why wouldn't I doubt the power of God if I've never experienced it? Why wouldn't I doubt that? But how do I start experiencing the power of God? Well, first of all, through my utter desperation, the same as when I had that knife to my throat, when I've got nowhere else to go, when I cry out, please help me. Because God never made the terms hard. Never. I did. The first time I started to seek this loving power, I found it. I found that it was always deep down within my soul. Always there. Deep down in every man, woman, and child, it says in our big book, is the fundamental idea of God. I'd just been so blocked off for all these years. And I remember what my sponsor said to me. It's just come into my mind. He said, Young, are you still doubting this power, this God? Are you still sticking to your atheism or your agnosticism? I said, yes, I am. He said, okay, let's think about this. All these billions of people since the beginning of time who have prayed to one God or another, who have displayed this degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness in their lives. You're saying to me that they're all wrong. But you who have lived for 5 minutes in this world, who's ended up burning his life to the ground, who's ended up in hospitals, rehabs, detoxes, psychiatric units, who's a hopeless junkie and a hopeless alcoholic, you're saying you're right and they're all wrong. He said, I'll just leave you with that. I'll just leave you with that. Because my life run on my ideas. I can see today it never worked. It never worked. And I can see today it's still the same. If I rely on self and not God, I always seem to be in fear, anxiety, worry. Because I get back into that position where what I want matters. And I remember someone said to me, Young, when you get into a position through being connected to God, through spiritual practices, through the persistence and the consistency over years or months, what you want will not matter anymore. That's where you'll find great peace. Being right won't matter anymore. That's where you'll find great, deep peace. Because my ideas don't work, but the God idea did. And I'm beyond grateful that you guys have shown me the way to God, the way to this loving power. And I'm so glad that teachers keep on showing up on my doorstep to guide me further along the path. Because it's almost like just the first doors were open through going through the 12 steps in this beautiful big book. And don't get me wrong, this is my meat and two veg, as we say in the UK. But now I'm getting deeper and deeper and deeper. I've just got a new guide and they're taking me through this spiritual text, another spiritual text. And I keep on discovering more and more and more. And there's no end to where this can go. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. So it says, and today, I live it because my idea don't work. But the God idea, ooh, thank you, God. Thank you. I'll end it there. Thank you so much, Justin.
Oh, thank you so much, Young. Fantastic. I took a whole bunch of notes. I've got some questions here. We've got a question that's come in from the live audience. And a reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Young, type it in the chat. I'll get to it. If you want to remain anonymous in that question, just put a note in there. Hey, don't call out my name on this, because this is being recorded and will be posted as a podcast. So we're going to get started with a question from the live audience. This comes from Lynette. Lynette says, Young, thank you for being honest and vulnerable in your share. My question is, when you sponsor someone who has challenges with God or a higher power, how do you navigate this with them?
Okay, great question. And I think many people do. Many people do. We live in an age where many people don't have religion. Many people have never experienced a spiritual life. I often say this. If someone's got a problem with step 2 or 3, when we start introducing God or a higher power, maybe they haven't got step 1. Because it's only the most desperate who are going to grab hold of this stuff. If I'm there and you're offering me a solution, but I'm arguing about it, maybe I'm just not ready. But saying that, I still think as a sponsor, as guides, we can present things in a way that might be more palatable for someone. I often say, look, if you don't want to use the word God, just use another word. Have your own experience. Have your own experience. But I'm very clear that if you are a drug addict or alcoholic, you're beyond human aid. Lack of power. And if they're unsure, look at their history. Say, what's your history? You've just told me you meant to go to your kid's birthday party and you drank a bottle of vodka. Are you saying you chose to do that? Or is that displaying a lack of power? So if lack of power is your problem, the answer is get into power. And the spiritual life to start with is very practical. Well, it's a very practical thing. We've got these 12 steps, these instructions that'll get me connected. So I always try and put things as simple as I can. But sometimes if someone's really arguing about it, maybe they're just not ready. Hope that helps.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that response there, Young. I'm going to pose a question here. We may have people in this room or that listen who are maybe saying, "Hey, Young, he talks about being heroin, crack, alcoholic, all these things. I'm just a process addiction person. I'm just with food. I'm just with drugs. I'm not with drugs, with food, with gambling, with sexual acting out in one way or another." How do I relate to somebody who's been in that place when I may consider myself, I'm a low bottom drunk? Talk to us about that.
Okay. So I believe, when we talk about those bedevilments on page 52, having trouble with personal relationships, can't control our emotional nature, prone to misery and depression, I think that's a human condition. I'm around a lot of humans and who are not like a drug addict or an alcoholic. But I think every human has in them this kind of spiritual thirst for wholeness. And they might need the love of my wife for me to feel okay. And if I feel she doesn't love me, I don't feel okay. I need to eat food. I need something. Now, for the majority of humans, they seem to just be able to go through life like that. But for those of us who have addictions to whatever that might be, it causes us problems. And the solution is, well, like I say earlier on, it says I need to be restored to sanity, to this place where I'm not doing insane things when it comes to whatever my addiction is. The word sanity comes from the Latin word sanitas, meaning whole. So it's like there's a part of me missing, whatever that, and I'm just filling it with whatever it might be for me. Gambling, sex, food. I'm doing that time and time again, and it's causing me some sort of problems. So if that's the case, the answer is becoming whole through the Spirit. I hope that answers it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Young. All right. Next question comes in from our live audience. This is from Jeffrey. Jeffrey says, Young, if our problems center in our minds, do you have a repetitive practice or action that enables your thought life to be placed on a higher loving plane, including in current sensitive moments and also in moments when there's not a cloud on the horizon?
Yeah, great question, Jeffrey. I have a very strict. Well, is it strict? It's just what I do. In the mornings, I do a lot of meditation and a lot of prayer. But then throughout the day, I love that thing in the big book. That it's often in life, for me anyway, the most seemingly simple things are the most useful. And when it says, I pause when agitated or doubtful, it's so effective for me. I do that throughout the day because I work in a very busy treatment center. I can say that because we're not on a problem. I got told off for breaking traditions by saying that. And yeah, anyway. And so I have to do that a lot because it's very challenging. I'm around a lot of very challenging people. Just pausing. I know today the power is in the pause. The power is in the pause. In that pause, something adjusts in me. And then, of course, this step 10 practice is so vital, so crucial to when, myself, because my self-will was so strong. When that fear comes into my head, straight away, I'll go immediately, because I've got into the habit of watching, go to God, discuss with another, turn my thoughts to someone I can help. So I've got these simple practices that I do each day. A simple prayer. I lecture on the 12 steps, and sometimes someone might say something, and I can feel myself feeling disturbed by what they've said, and it's not them; it's something that's disturbable in me. And I'll just stop lecturing, and I'll start praying in that moment. I won't close my eyes. I'll just, God, please help me with some patience in this moment. And if I don't do that, I would probably answer with sarcasm or be unkind, because that's in the nature of me without flowing in God. I hope that's helpful, Jeffrey. Thanks for the question, man.
Yeah, thank you, Young. All right, next question from our live audience comes from Abby. Abby says, "Thank you, Young. I wondered if you had any advice for someone who knows that God can, if sought, but struggles with the idea that God loves them enough."
Okay. That's a very good question. What I know is every single person is good enough. It's just that sometimes we can be blind to that. If I was feeling like that, I haven't felt, well, I felt like that before, but not during, having God in my life. I used to feel like a piece of dirt. I used to feel I wasn't good enough, that everyone's better than me, that I'm a loser and all these things. And like I say, I know that we are all perfectly imperfect. What would I do? I would increase my spiritual practice. I would make sure that in the morning when I'm reading spiritual literature, I'm doing it very, very slowly, line by line. And I'm not just doing it by numbers to tick a box. What does this mean to me in this moment? I would get a really strong crew of people that are seekers, people that are living this spiritual life. And I would be around those people, and I would learn off them, and I would ask them, how do you get connected? How do you stay connected? What does your spiritual practice look like? Because it makes sense to me when I was broken, or even today, it makes sense to me that I want to surround myself with people that I want something that they've got. Because it sounds quite selfish. I want what you've got. But then when I get those things, I become more useful. And Abby, the more useful we become, in my experience, the more loved we feel from a loving God. The more useful we are, happiness just comes as a byproduct, not something we're searching for. We're not searching for love anymore. We're not searching for happiness, contentment. It just comes as a byproduct of being useful. Because I can give you my experience, actually. If I don't feel kind of this loved from this power, I'm going to look elsewhere, you know. And in the past, it's like I'm jumping into relationships just because I need to feel okay. I just need to get plugged in. I hope that's helpful, Abby.
I love that, Young. And I'm gonna also take this question. I'm gonna give a little bit of my own personal experience on this, if you're okay with that, Young. Um, so there's a line in We Agnostics, page 44, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic. I have added in the word or religionist, someone who thinks they know God, because I'm that person. My whole life, I was very religious, very faith based, very all these things. And yet I've had these feelings that God does not love me enough. And here's what I had to do, what I had to have somebody walk me through. Well, one, I love the set aside prayer. Set aside everything I think I know, especially about you, God, so that I can have a new understanding. So that's part of it. And I literally had to set aside the God of my understanding and fire that God's butt and say, you know what? Whoever you are, this God that I'm thinking of and praying to and whatever, and not getting answers from, you're not good enough for me. And that doesn't mean that I left my faith of my past. But I tell you, what you mentioned when you talked about this, Young, about getting a group of people, like-minded people that are seekers, man, getting involved with people, learning people from other faiths and no faiths, and getting and talking about this God idea and how it works for them has changed my life and has brought me into the loving arms of a capital G God who loves me no matter what. And that has changed the way that I look at these things. Young, do you have any additional comments on that?
I was just thinking, you know, about some guys I have in my life. A lot of guys, all we talk about is the spirit now, the spiritual world, God. And I loved what you said, Justin. I have to lay aside everything I thought I know, or I think I know. I have to do that every single day so I can have a fresh experience. And going back to your question, Abby, what I found is look, another paradox. I have to become a seeker, but I have to stop trying too hard. That doesn't make much sense. I've got to stop trying to look for this God. Where is it? What is it? And just start living in a certain way. And then the idea, the thought, the feeling, the experience will just come. Will just come. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Young. All right. I've got another question, a reminder to our audience. If you have a question for Young, type it in the chat. We'll get to that. But I've got several things here. Young, you talked about living in hell in active addiction. And you also referenced living in hell in sobriety. Talk to us about the difference between the hell of active addiction, the hell of sobriety, and what it looks like to live in recovery as opposed to those places.
Very good question. Very good question. So I'll start first. To live in hell in my active using, it's waking up the last year and a half out there. I woke up every single day. It's not an exaggeration to be faced with, well, I know the words today, those four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair, knowing that I'm not seeing my children, knowing that now I'm just what we call in the UK a gyro junkie. I'm on welfare. I get a welfare check that has to last me for 2 weeks. And on day one, I spend everything on drugs. And suddenly, oh, how am I going to get food for the next 14 days? And I think it's more a feeling, you know, the outside, it looks like hell. It's everything I'm looking at seems dark and miserable and negative. I'm standing in the methadone clinic and I'm amongst broken souls like me, the walking dead. I'm on my hands and knees in my tower block outside getting cigarettes off the floor. I'm not eating for days at a time. I'm having to steal. That for me is living hell, which I did. And living hell in sobriety. Sobriety, as one of my friends calls it. I'm sober. I'm not drinking. I'm not using. But why do I feel so miserable? Why do I feel really depressed? Why is it I can't just kind of feel okay? It's that place, you know, where it says in I Think a Vision for You, something like he gets that place where he knows he cannot live with it or without it. it's like my head is trying, just trying not to drink or not to use, just counting days. It's almost like I'm doing time. I'm not living. I'm just barely existing, but yet I'm clean and sober. And I still got this hole in my soul, and I'll just fill it with anything: gambling, women, something. That to me is also hell. And in some ways, and it might sound weird, in some ways that's worse. Why do I say that? Because at least in active addiction, I do get the ease and comfort through the things that I was doing. But in sobriety, painful. And I'm going to meetings and I'm looking at you guys who have got something, and I hate you all. And you're saying things like, I've got a life beyond my wildest dream, and I just want to go and smash you in the face. That's me in sobriety. Painful, painful, painful. So the next question was, I think, what's the difference? What's the difference? We flew Bob D, the AA speaker, over to Scarborough last summer. And one of the things he said to me really stuck with me. He said, maybe we're still living in the Garden of Eden. Maybe we're still living in the Garden of Eden. Every day I'm not in that hell. I feel like I'm in heaven. I feel like honestly, I really do. I really do. I never take my foot off this spiritual gas, because I never want to go back to that place again. And I love that. I get that. I haven't left the Garden of Eden. I was just so blind to it because I was relying on my old ideas. I was relying on me to try and create this happiness. And any happiness that I create is just a false sense of happiness that is always so temporary. So it looks the exact opposite. It's almost like the hell that I've explained was the upside down world from Stranger Things. I'm in the world, but I'm not part of the world. And now the lights have come on. Now I've plugged the lamp in, and now I can see the lights in you guys. That's what it feels like today. Yeah.
I love that, Young, and that question. Maybe we still live in the Garden of Eden. That's a powerful thing to consider and think about. On that note, though, living in acceptance, living in the Garden of Eden, living in recovery, in this happy, joyous, and free that I see in your eyes, that I hear in your voice, and I feel in your message. What about when it isn't the Garden of Eden? I'm still living happy, joyous, and free, and all hell around me is breaking loose, and things are happening to me. How do I practice acceptance? How do I deal with that and still live in the Garden of Eden without being dragged out into hell?
I can share a very personal thing with you guys, and I will do. I think I've shared it once before in a meeting. So my auntie died last March. She was like my mother to me, loved her dearly. I saw her die very slowly from dementia, And when she died, she left me. I'm a man. I'm not a man of material means. I have everything I need, but I don't really own anything. I'm only 5 years in. I'm still rebuilding my life. I work. I pay taxes. I do have a car, etc. Anyway, she left me a house, right? Check this. Worth £600,000. But my cousins sold it before she died, knowing that they would get the money. Now, if I wasn't relying on God, oh my God, I would be going back out using and drinking on that. Do I feel resentful today? No, that's a miracle. Now, when I've spoken to that story to a lot of guys, they're like, oh my God, you need to fight this. And I thought, no, I'm not going to even fight it. God doesn't want me to have that money. God doesn't want me to have that money. Maybe God doesn't want me to have that money because it would distract me from my mission today. Maybe. But my point in sharing that story with you, imagine getting through something like that, because money isn't my master anymore. I'm not ruled by it. So I've gone through many things that in the past I would have thought about hell and how do I get through this? How did I get through that? Now, did I just get over it like that? No, that I'd be lying. I felt it used to trouble me. It used to trouble me. And how did I get through that? I prayed a lot. I meditated a lot. I was honest with my fellows around how I was feeling. You know, sometimes I'm bitching and I'm moaning and I'm being honest. I'm being vulnerable. I'm not keeping it into myself, trying to present this character that, oh, look at me, I'm so spiritual. It doesn't affect. No, of course it affected me. Of course it affected me. But and I think perhaps it's because I had enough spiritual juice in the tank that I was able to flow through it pretty cool, actually. I believe if I didn't have the practice that I have, I might not have made it through that storm, because there's always going to be a storm. Life isn't meant to be fair, but I know, well, maybe I know. I think one day I'll look back on that moment and I'll understand why it happened. I just don't understand yet, but I've accepted it for what it is. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, thank you. And that's a powerful personal example of that. Thank you for sharing that. Early in your talk here, you mentioned the experience you had seeing a young child in her wellies jumping up and down and just having the time of her life, happiest moment of her life, the light in her eyes was on. And later you said in the talk, you brought it back around to this, and I love this, given a child's eyes of wonder, the light up and seeing new things for the first time and just feeling that joy. As you look back at your own recovery walk, or maybe the walk of somebody you've worked with, can you think of the event that happened that helped that light come on, either in your eyes or the person that was, and how that changed and shifted everything in your perception and perspective?
For me, I don't think it was one event, Justin. It was a series of events that happened. And one day, suddenly, I realized I'm just looking at the world in a very different way. I remember a spiritual experience that I had, and I was walking down this street. It sounds like a nothingness. To try and explain it, it will probably sound like nothing. That's why I don't really share it a lot. But I'm walking down this street. I'm still going through my 12 steps, and all the blossom, it all just comes down like this. And it was almost like something awoken in me in that moment. See, it sounds like nothing. It sounds so mundane. It was a feeling inside. And suddenly I remember I looked back after a few months later and I thought, wow, I haven't thought about drugs and alcohol for a long time. And I remember someone cut me up in the traffic when I did manage to get a car, because when I left the treatment center, all I owned was one bag of clothes to my whole world, 43 years old. When I did get a car, I remember someone cutting me off. Now, I was the sort of guy who used to jump out of his car if that would happen and bang on your bonnet and want to fight you. That's where I come from, being, I was going to say an idiot, let's say, an idiot like that. That was me. And I remember this guy cut me up and then he had the audacity to start shouting at me. And I reacted I didn't react. It was just little moments like that, little moments. So nothing. Although that blossom was quite a big moment for me. I think it, like my sponsor used to say to me, Young, I can't explain this stuff to you. I can't explain God. I can't explain an awakening. You need to have your own experience. And then you can show others through your behavior, through your attitude, through the change in you. Hope that answers you, Justin.
Absolutely. We got one more question from our live audience that just came in from Tony. Tony says, thank you, Young, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. I recently lost a sponsee. He's a man who cannot or will not work with me. How many sponsees should I take on after only being sober over a year? What are your thoughts on that, Young?
After a year, I was working with people probably most days. But look, there's no right or wrong. This isn't to go, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. What does your heart tell you? What does your spirit tell you? Do you have the time? Because I don't know, you might be have children, have to do this, have to do this. How much time do you spend watching TV? Is that feeding your soul? I know working with sponsees will feed your soul. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, and I'm certainly not any authority. But I will use my time. You know, before I start work in the morning at 7:30, I'm working with sponsees. You know, it's the highlight of my life. They're a mirror. I learn as much off them as they do me. They fill me with joy, seeing the lights come on in their eyes. And this is the thing: there's thousands of us dying out there, and whatever you've got is you've got something. You can help someone where a doctor can't, where a psychologist can't, where a counselor can't, but you can. How beautiful is that, man?
Oh, what a beautiful way to wrap this up. How beautiful is that? Thank you, Young. A big thanks to you for a fantastic RECO12 weekly speaker meeting. If we missed your question out there in the live audience, or if you have more, consider joining our WhatsApp community. I put the link in the chat earlier. I'll put it in again before we close down to join in there. If you haven't done so already, please consider rating and reviewing RECO12 podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's a powerful way to work step 12 and make sure that this message gets out to more people who need it. Check out all the other things that RECO12 has. Now, before we close up here, next week, come back next week. We'll be hearing from a RECO12 first timer, Silvio D, whose topic will be 17 years of untreated alcoholism. I think we'll dive into the hell of sobriety, or sobriety, as we talked about here today, next week. And I think that will be really cool to hear. So come back next week and learn from Silvio's experience, strength, and hope. All right, now let's launch off into the rest of our day with the prayer of St. Francis that Young will say for us.
Oh, let me just get it.
Okay, no worries.
So sorry, Justin. I wasn't expecting. I know I did ask you to do that. It's my favorite. It's my favorite prayer. And apparently, while I'm finding it, apparently it wasn't written by St. Francis.
All right. While he's pulling that up, if anybody wants to get in touch with Young, he did put his number in the chat. We're not gonna advertise that out here. If you want to get in touch with him, send an email to RECO12pod@gmail.com. I'll get you connected with him there. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Justin. Okay, everyone. The prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to an eternal life. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Young. All right, remember, everybody, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back, and when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place. And and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me, your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.